What's the feeling now? Is there a change of sort of vibe in the city, or is it still very much one on tenterhooks?
Well, first, Sheila, thank you for having me on. I'm sure I speak for a lot of people in expressing my appreciation that people care outside of Minnesota about what's going on.
They very much do. Yeah, they very much do.
It's very heavy. I was on the phone with several colleagues yesterday. The subject comes up, and people really feel the weight of this on their shoulders. Has it changed yet? I don't think there's, as of this morning, there are not new reports of new violence in the Twin Cities. But on the other hand, I don't know that we've seen any real movement, any withdrawal of ICE officers. We've got some 3,000 ICE officers in the Twin Cities. And that's more than the combined police forces of Minneapolis and St. Paul. They're everywhere. And
well, that's very revealing. I hadn't known about those figures so starkly high, so much higher than the local police forces are, which again must be very visible, therefore.
They're visible, but what's unusual about it is that they don't wear uniforms. They drive around in unmarked SUVs and pickup trucks. They're all armed. They wear masks. They wear kerchiefs over their faces so that you can't see who they are. You can't identify them. As far as I know, we still don't know the names of any of the officers, the agents involved in killing Alex Pretti. And that information is not forthcoming. And I think because Renee Good and Alex Pretti were killed within about a mile of each other, your listeners might think that this is a localized, isolated phenomena. And it's not. Minneapolis is one part of a very large metropolitan area. There's within our county, there's like 40 plus municipalities. And this enforcement action, this surveillance is going on throughout the metropolitan area. A lawyer I know went out himself. He's about 20 miles from Minneapolis. He's a criminal defense lawyer. He went out to observe ICE, and twice while sitting in his car, once in a church parking lot and once someplace else, he was accosted by ICE. He's not a person of color. He was sitting there observing them, and he was harassed by ICE in the time he was out on the street. The police chief of one of our suburban cities had a press conference early last week, surrounded by other police chiefs, to report that their off-duty police officers of color were reporting that they were being approached by ICE in their cars, in the street, to find out whether or not they were citizens and prove that they were citizens. And you have to think about, the police force is about 12% people of color, and the state is only about 25%. You have to think of the statistics involved and the chances that these folks would randomly, how much enforcement must be going on for these folks to be randomly accosted like this? And
it doesn't get more un-American than that, really, does it?
Well, no, it's completely, the violations of the First Amendment or Fourth Amendment, stop and seizure, police are supposed to have reasonable cause to stop anyone to ask them questions. And this is rampantly, there's really very little evidence of cause.
At least one judge has ordered the more senior head of ICE to appear in court, I think on Friday. I don't know whether this will happen or not, to answer what the judge obviously believes are plausible charges that detainees who are people who've been taken by ICE in Minneapolis are not being processed quickly enough. And that includes very young children, toddlers, being left in these detention centres, unable to contact their families, sometimes unable to see their lawyers. Lawyers, I know, have been denied access on occasion to these detention centres. Is there a sense that the federal and the state-led legal systems are in a battle as well here?
No, that is all misinformation coming from the federal government.
So those systems that exist are still functioning?
Yeah, those systems are functioning, but, in some sense, even our police federation, which is very, very pro-police and takes a very, very hard right-wing look at things, even they have come out because it's apparent they're concerned about people losing trust in just policing generally. And of course, it's hard for a system of justice to work if people lose faith in the officers. But after Alex Pretti was killed, the governor did call out the National Guard, but not to assist ICE, but because the governor was concerned that there would be violent protests in the wake of Alex Pretti's death. And so they tried to cordon off an area, and they had the National Guard wearing very distinctive, apparently, colored vests so that you could easily tell them apart from other people. There's been allegations by the federal government that Minnesota won't cooperate, that we won't release detainees. There's really no evidence that any of that is going on.
And in your view, Eric, as an ethics lawyer, as a lawyer, is the Constitution strong enough to withstand all of this, to truly show itself to be what it was supposed to be?
Sheila, that's a question we ask ourselves multiple times a day. Every lawyer, I'm a part of an organization of ethics lawyers. There is deep fear that it is uncertain whether the Trump administration will follow court orders. They have followed some, but they tend to run roughshod over the law. And it is a huge question mark as to whether the administration will follow the courts.
I've noticed overnight a couple of fairly senior Republican congressmen and women finally saying the kind of stuff I certainly would have expected them to be saying much earlier on in the process, but doing it anyway. Is that the group that you need to hear most from at the moment?
We're kind of at the mercy of 52 senators in this country who follow the president and have been very reluctant to challenge him on anything. And this is really the first glimmer. It is disappointing that it would take the death of two people to finally wake people up. But it does seem the one thing that was noticeable over the weekend was the silence from Congress on the Republican side about what had happened to Alex Pretti. And what you read in the national news right now is that there are murmurings about, is there some way for the president to de-escalate? Essentially, one would expect declare victory and go home. But we haven't seen it yet. There hasn't been any mass departure of ICE agents that anyone seems to be aware of.
And even if that were to happen, of course, you would breathe a sigh of relief living in Minneapolis. A lot of sorrow and a lot of stress, of course, would remain. But it's happening elsewhere. It's not a policy that's being abandoned by any means, is it?
No, but one of the things that's been impressive about what folks have done in Minneapolis, truly, the grassroots organizing that they've done and this practice of observing and recording, it's unfortunate, and I think a lot of observers and recorders do get triggered when they're confronted by ICE. That's a human thing. But that process, there are already trainings going on. I saw one article about 500 people being trained in Pittsburgh. I saw another article of people being trained someplace else. And this may be the template for where this occurs elsewhere.
A citizen model almost of resisting it.
A citizen model, and, supported also by these large protests. Before, Alex Pretti's kind of dominated the news since Saturday, but, on Friday, there were 50,000 people that showed up at a march in Minneapolis. Which is, kind of exceeded all others. And I personally believe that I've been to some protests, and when you go to a protest, what it does is it doesn't change anything immediately, but it builds solidarity. It lets people know that there are others that think like you. And every time someone goes to a protest who's never gone to one before, they become braver. And they become more likely, I believe, to take action the next time. And so something has been built in Minneapolis, and I think that will carry over into other cities, because I agree with you. This will not be the end.